very desperate way. In many ways, they seek happiness. A young man may think, oh, I'll be so happy if I just get that new computer. I'll be happy forever. Well, we know that's not true. Thing doesn't work right, and he drops it, and he loses his happiness pretty fast. A man maybe in his 30s or so says, oh, I'd be the happiest man in the world if I just had a BMW. That's going to make me happy forever. He gets it and he parks it on the supermarket lot and somebody runs into it. Then he has to make those monthly payments. And then the insurance is outrageous. And then the new model comes out and he really wants it now, and he is not so happy with the old model. And the young housewife with some young children, she says, oh, if I just had my own house, I'd be happy forever. She gets it. Neighbors are terrible. They throw their garbage over the fence into her yard. She's having problems with her kids, and all of a sudden that house that she thought she was going to love so much doesn't look so hot. Happiness from material things is a very short-lived, temporary form of happiness. It's not enduring. The material things in themselves just can't keep making us happy. That's one of the illusions about being rich, thinking riches are going to really make me happy, and yet there's a lot of rich people that are very sad. Happiness has to be something more than just material possessions. It's like an illustration years ago the Society came out with that I used a number of times about a butterfly representing happiness. And a man wants to be happy, and so he's chasing that butterfly. And he has a net. And the butterfly is flying away, and he runs after that butterfly and brings the net down, but he misses it every time. And all day long he's chasing that butterfly, but he keeps missing it, and the butterfly just gets away. And he's frustrated. Another man doesn't chase the butterfly. Another man has a little piece of ground next to his house, and he digs it up, takes the stones out, cultivates it, makes it real pretty, plants a nice garden with some pretty flowers around it, works hard all day long doing that, perspiring in the hot sun, and he sits down on a rock at the end of the day and he looks at that garden that he worked hard on. And the butterfly comes down and lands on his shoulder. Do you get the point? Happiness is not a direct object. You don't just pursue happiness. Happiness is a byproduct. It comes with work. It comes with service to Jehovah. You've experienced it. A Saturday morning, you don't feel like getting up. You want to sack out, rest a while, and then your conscience starts bothering you. And you have a sister or a brother you're supposed to meet and go out in service with, so you scramble around real quick, you get out, and you go out in service for a couple of hours, and when you come in, how do you feel? You know how you feel. I know how I feel. Really good. The rest of the day is a great success. Why? You did something. You did something that made you feel good, and you used your life in a good way. Well, that's how it is for us. We're happy when we do things, when we're busy in doing things. And that's very, very important. Our brothers and sisters in many lands around the earth are doing the same thing we're doing, and they're very happy. About 2 years ago, my wife and I had the privilege of going to Cuba with members of the governing body to have these assemblies that the Cuban government allowed us to have. The Cuban government invited members of the governing body. They initiated it, saying, we'd like to have you come over and hold assemblies here. I had the privilege of going with Brother Barr. I was his interpreter, and we went to the province of Camagüey. Brother Barry went to Havana with Brother Perla. Brother Lush, he went to Holguin, which is another province, with Brother Samalot. And what a nice time we had. There were hundreds upon hundreds of brothers. We were told not to have over 500 there, so we didn't count. That way we didn't have to lie. But the brothers were thrilled. It was an exciting, exciting experience. For you young ones here, life and parents, think about some of the Cuban brothers raising their kids in the truth there over the years. It's eased up quite a bit. We hope it stays that way. The brothers can go to their meetings, they can sing songs, they go out preaching. But in the past, every time a child did not participate in patriotic activities, you know what the punishment was for many? they sent one of the parents to jail for 2 or 3 months. And every time a daughter or a son then refused to participate, one of the parents went to jail. And there was one of the mothers there talking with my wife, and her daughter, I think, was getting baptized at that time. And the mother said, "Look at that girl over there. She caused me to go to jail more times than you can imagine, and I love her for having the courage to stand up and serve Jehovah. I'd do it 1,000 times again," because they stood fast and would not participate in the so-called patriotic things that take people away from Jehovah and his worship. On the program, there was a couple, very good-looking, handsome man and his wife, probably about 35, 40 years old each, both pioneers, very poor, because most of the brothers in Cuba are very poor. Policeman that accompanied us was a secret policeman of the government that went everywhere we went, because that was part of the arrangement. He was just a young fellow, about 30, 35, and he made $20 a month. That was his salary from the government. And he got his house and a few things, but that's all. But this couple got on the platform at the assembly. Both of them were regular pioneers. And 2 sons got up. One boy was 16 and the other was 13. 2 handsome young men, dressed nicely, poor, but they each had a jacket on. I'm sure it was the only one they owned. And they were on the platform with their parents being interviewed, and you should have seen the poise and the dignity and the way these young boys spoke out, 16 and 13 years of age. Parents pioneers. Both of these boys, think about this, they were baptized when they were 7 years old. They made their dedication. When they were 8 years old, they became regular pioneers. The boy 16's got 8 years seniority as a regular pioneer. But what a nice-looking family. They in no way are inferior to any of the products of Cuba or any other country. These young men know what they're doing. They know how to talk to people. They know how to deal with matters and problems as young as they are. So the truth is a powerful, powerful force. And one of the things, the reason I mention this to you, is we want to start our children out very young in serving Jehovah. They make their dedication decision. We know that. But we make the decision as parents to train them up in the way of Jehovah from infancy. And what happens in a lot of cases when they get into the adolescent years, there's a drifting that can take place. When they're very young, they can be very fine and do well. Then they get into the very difficult teen years, and problems can arise, and parents need to continue insisting on attendance at the meetings, getting out in service, building them up. I'll tell you a funny experience. Brother Splain related it when we went on a trip to serve the brothers, and I thought it was very interesting. It's funny, and yet it's the truth, and maybe not funny. A young man, 17 years old, told his father, he says, "Dad, about time I started making my own decisions. I'm 17 years old now." And the father says, "Well, yeah," he says, you're growing up very well, son. Maybe that's a good idea." "Well, that's fine, Dad. So I'll make my own decisions on going out in the service and the meetings and so forth." The father said, "Fine, son." So Saturday rolls around, Saturday morning. The father goes into the boy's room and says, "Come on, son, we're heading out for the service." Son says, "Sorry, Dad, I stayed up late last night. I was tired." He says, "And I just don't feel up to it this morning. I'm just going to sack out and sleep in." "Okay, son, you're making your own decisions. You decided that. That's fine. Go ahead." Next Saturday rolled around. The father went to get the boy. "We're going out in service with the family, son." He said, "No, well, Dad, I've got a lot of homework to do." He says, "I've decided that, no, I'm going to stay in and get my homework done." "Okay, son, you're making your own decisions." Third Saturday rolled around. Father walks in the room, pulls the blankets off his boy, jerks him, pulls him out of bed, and says, "Get dressed, boy. We're going out in service." He says, "Dad," he's highly irritated, you told me I could make my own decisions." He says, "That's right. And you've been making your decisions now for 2 weeks, and you haven't made one right yet, so you're going out with us into the field ministry." Well, what it points up, you hear some parents say this: "Well, I don't want to push my child. I want him to be motivated from his heart to go out and to go to meetings." Well, it sounds good, but it isn't. Does your heart always make you do what's right? Let's be honest. Do you always have your heart tell you, oh, I'm going out in the field today. I'm going to the meet. The heart is treacherous. We know that our heart seeks to please this old flesh frequently. And that's why we have to use what we know here and say, no, put it down. You have to take your heart out sometimes and slap it around a little bit and then put it back in there. And that's how it is. So when we have our children, I'm talking about young children living at home, or it's teenagers, we don't just say, well, we want him to do it from his heart. I'll give you an illustration a brother used. He says, your boy gets a job at McDonald's. First job. So he's going to serve at the counter or something. And the first morning he's supposed to go to work, he's there in bed, and so Mama goes in and says, son, you got your job at McDonald's. Well, Mom, I just don't feel like getting. Well, you got a job there. I'll get to it, Mom. Call him up for me. So Mama gets on the phone, and she phones the manager at McDonald's. She says, sir, my boy really doesn't feel like it coming in this morning. In our household, sir, we don't push our kids. We feel that what they do should be just motivated from the heart. Now, I'm sure if you'll give him 2 or 3 weeks, I think he'll come around, and of course you'll hold the job for him there. That's nonsense. So, and you know what the strange thing is sometimes in families? In every other area of life, we tell our kids what to do. But why sometimes when it comes to the truth, we back off and don't say, no, this is what we do here. This is how this household operates. So this is just some food for thought for parents. And for you youngsters, don't misunderstand me. We love you very much. And it's because of love that we talk this way. We know. There's a saying I used to use in a talk. When I talked to some of the kids, I'd say, I've walked your path. I was a kid. You might not believe it now, but I was a youngster. I wanted to go out and run around till late at night. I wanted to sit up and watch the late movie, the midnight movie at night, and I hated getting up in the morning. I wanted to run around and do whatever I wanted to do. I know, I've walked your path. Has one of you walked my path? One of you kids, have you walked my path? Not one. I know more than you do. I've been there, you haven't. So listen to me. And listen to your parents. They've been there. They've been through the pitfalls. They've been through the tears. They've been through the problems. And that's why when parents put certain restrictions on, it's really because they love you and they want to protect you. And we want you to grow up to be fine, young Christian men and women serving Jehovah whole-souled. So those are just a few thoughts to keep in mind. We're happy when we're busy doing God's will. There's something else that comes into play here I want to mention. Don't ever get to the point where you feel that you're insignificant or no value to Jehovah. Every person is of value to Jehovah. He can take the man or the woman that seems to be a nobody and bring that person up to be a wonderful person with wonderful gifts and abilities to serve. This world puts people down. Much of the so-called commercial and education factors put people down, make a lot of people feel inferior or worthless. Jehovah's organization does not do that. With Jehovah's organization, we like to see people blossom and grow like a flower. I remember a young man in New York, in the congregation where I was, a very timid 17-year-old young man came to the Kingdom Hall, could hardly speak Spanish, and yet he was of Spanish background, and wanted to learn, but extremely shy and timid. And I had the pleasure of what the world would have swallowed him up and stomped him down into the ground. But I had the pleasure of watching that young man grow in the congregation, became a ministerial servant, became a pioneer. Then he became an elder, came into Bethel doing part-time work. Then he moved to the Dominican Republic, became a circuit overseer. and he is a wonderful, lovely brother who is still very mild and loving, but he's a man now who has a degree of self-confidence. He knows what his service to Jehovah is. He can get on the platform and give fine talks and encouragement. This is what Jehovah's organization does. It lifts us up and builds us up. And that's why never should we feel we're insignificant or of little value. Let's read a scripture, Mark chapter 5. This is a very touching account that you've all read, I know, when you read and studied the Greatest Man book. But we'll just run through it briefly here. Mark chapter 5, we'll start with verse 25. Now there was a woman subject to a flow of blood 12 years. And she had been put to many pains by many physicians, and had spent all her resources, and had not been benefited, but rather had got worse. When she heard the things about Jesus, she came behind in the crowd and touched his outer garment. For she kept saying, "If I touch just his outer garments, I shall get well." And immediately her fountain of blood dried up, and she sensed in her body that she had been healed of the grievous sickness. Well, that's a wonderful account that took place there. Let's continue reading. Immediately also Jesus recognized in himself that power had gone out of him. And he turned about in the crowd and began to say, "Who touched my outer garments?" But his disciples began to say to him, "You see the crowd pressing in upon you, and do you say, 'Who touched me?'" However, he was looking around to see her that had done this. But the woman, frightened and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be in good health from your grievous sickness." Isn't that a beautiful account? Who healed her? Jesus didn't know who touched him. Remember? Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And the disciple says, "What do you mean, who touched you?" You can imagine people all wanted to touch the Holy One of Israel. Who could see that woman working her way up through the crowd to get to Jesus? Who could appreciate all the pain she'd been through, the suffering she'd been through? Who could appreciate the quality of her faith? Who allowed power to flow out of Jesus into that woman so she'd be healed? It had to be Jehovah. You see, Jesus knew something happened that the apostles didn't know. That's why they said, "Well, what are you saying? Who touched you?" But Jesus knew something's happened, because he felt, the Bible says, power go out of him. He knew something remarkable has happened. What does that tell you about Jehovah? Isn't that remarkable? He took into account that woman. Now I have a question for you. What's her name? Me neither. Bible doesn't say. It doesn't say. Nobody. She was just nobody, was she? Jehovah knew her. He took care of her. You see the point? So don't ever get into the feeling that, well, I'm nobody. What does God care about me? He does care. And sometimes we'll say, well, I'm so imperfect. Well, of course you are. Who isn't? We all are. We're getting life by undeserved kindness, brothers and sisters. We're not getting it because we're so righteous and so good. We do our best, yes, but life is coming, God's undeserved kindness. But Jehovah sees all of us, and the beauty of it, he knows. He understands us. He knows when we make mistakes, and sometimes we get down on ourselves and beat ourselves, I'm sure. You know what Brother Franz used to say about that? I remember once at an assembly, and the Israelites were all waiting for Jehovah to clear away the fog and the mist when the Egyptians were after them, and the Israelites were going to cross the Red Sea. And I remember Brother Franz saying, Jehovah said to them, "Stop praying and get going." And what that means is, get up. Get going with your life. Serve Jehovah with rejoicing. Don't ever go through life lamenting and looking back at things that have happened and, oh my, this. And Jehovah knows. Jesus paid the price. It covers our past mistakes. It covers current mistakes. And even in the future, as long as we're genuine in serving God and doing our best, Jehovah forgives us. But we have to put forth the effort and have faith in the arrangement. And then we can serve him with a good heart. Now back to that woman. She didn't have the right to touch Jesus. That's true, isn't it? Because she had a flow of blood. And in the Hebrew Scriptures, it tells us a woman with a flow of blood was unclean. Now think of it. Here's this woman, unclean, coming through a crowd and is going to touch the Holy One of Israel. Jehovah God obviously knew about it, could see it. His own law that he inspired said a woman with a flow of blood is unclean, and yet what happens? Evidently, he pushes his own law aside, lets her touch Jesus, and she becomes clean, healed. Doesn't that tell you something else about Jehovah? He takes everything into account. He looks at the whole picture. He sees our whole life, our whole background, the things we battle with, our imperfections, and he still loves us. And he does what he can to help us. That's a wonderful thing. That should really move us to want to serve Jehovah, to love doing his will. There's a scripture in John that speaks of Jehovah is greater than our heart. And what that means is that our heart sometimes focuses in just on small individual imperfections and problems we have. But Jehovah sees much more than just our little heart. He sees the whole picture. He's greater than our heart. And we're grateful for that because he does indeed love every one of us. And so when you get discouraged and blue, think about that woman and think about the wonderful hope we have and the beautiful things that are in store for us and our great privilege of serving Jehovah God right up to the end. And then we can rejoice and be happy in our service. So, brothers and sisters, it's been a pleasure to be with you. We've had a wonderful time with your Kingdom Hall dedication. You have every reason to be very, very happy with this fine Kingdom Hall and with some fine elders that you have here and the congregation itself. It's a rich blessing to be able just to come together, sing a song of praise to Jehovah, enjoy your life that he's given to you, and serve with a whole heart and be happy in your service. So thank you for everything.